Hello, very dear students and my colleagues and the audience worldwide. This is again Professor Dr. Zia Ahmed recording a short video on the poem Reflection by Rafat as a part of the project to facilitate my students and so that they can prepare their studies very well and to save some data regarding this for the future generations as well. So once again, this is the poem Reflection. Part 2 have been done already and today we are on part 3. As the last two sections indicated that the poet is trying to tell us the poetic process, the steps of the poetic process or the difficulties involved into that and the kind of thing he wants to bring before us to let us know that this poetic process is not easy. There are a number of problems, number of limitations, number of things which happen and ultimately the poet succeeds in doing so. So the process is being explained, just like the process of making poetry or becoming a poet by Wordsworth in his prelude was talked about, that his mental stages are there and he has to cover all that. Then there are lack of inspirations and then there are abundance of inspiration to Wordsworth and he tries to seek inspiration for everything of nature and ultimately succeeds. Though nature is here not present in that sense as it is in the case of Wordsworth, but it is still there in the shape of man's nature, that it creates impediments, it creates the obstacles in the way of creating poetry. And the poet is here explaining in one way or the other in different parts, different stages of the poetic process that he is involved in and how does he reach to that. For this purpose, we need to look at the poem first of all. So this is the poem, as I suggested already, Reflection by Rafat. It's part 1 and 2 have been talked about already. So I'm taking my audience direct to part 3 and it starts like that. Words die earlier than the emotions. Words die earlier than the emotions. They were meant to convey, for words are flesh and blood, are real emotions only a state of mind, the tone of green an artist sees in turning light. So these six lines, three set of 6 lines go to let us know the difference between the words and the emotion. First of all, the poet says that the words are physical being. He compares them with the body of flesh and blood in the third line. And then he comes to say, and name them as the real kind of thing. In comparison to that, emotions are just a state of mind. And the relationship, the interconnectivity between the emotion and the words is that words are the carriers of emotion. Emotion is a state of mind, as the poet says, but the same state of mind is translated by the words into a physical reality. So one can say that inside emotion and feeling, as Coleridge would have said about the process of creating poetry, that first of all it is fancy, then it's imagination, primary imagination, then secondary imagination, ultimately the poem comes into being. So that's the type of thing the poet wants to suggest. However, the tone of green is another addition by the poet. He says that if you look at the light which is turning and taking different shapes at that time, you will be able to find out that always there's a green light available somewhere as a shade, maybe at the upper portion, maybe at the lower portion of the light, but it is still there. So that's why the poet says that it is the kind of words are like the green shade of the light as they are there in this way. The words give kind of cover, kind of covering with which the emotions can be wrapped up, and ultimately it comes to the thing which is called as the we can say poetry. That is the combination. That means clearly that poetry is going to be the combination of the words and the emotion. So in the absence of the emotions, words cannot work and create poetry. Same is the case with the words. That is, the emotion is there, feeling is there, but we don't have the proper word and proper diction for this purpose. Maybe the poetic process again becomes problematic. So in this way, this part of the poem goes to prove that both things are necessary. One is emotion, other is the word. The poet continues in the remaining portion of the poem to let us know what are the emotions and what are the words and how do they interact and how do they not interact at all. So in this case, let us proceed further and see what does the poet say further. The poet says, what is so true as an artist's vision, or so untrue as an artist's vision? And yet he has no choice, for these repetitive illusions keep their summer holidays. He lives or dies by them. Now, this section of the poem is again begins with the questions like, what is so true as an artist's vision? and or so untrue as an artist's vision. So there are different views about the vision of an artist. What he says that may be considered true, or it may not be considered true at all. So it can happen at the same time. The vision of the artist, the imagination of the artist, or the imagery which he wants to create, possibly can be considered true and can be considered untrue as well. The poet puts a question. It's not clear about that. It's putting a question to the reader. What kind of answer can come? And it's a style of debate also. It's a style of talking to the reader as well, that this is going to be something which can happen, that the same vision may be true, same vision may not be true. What is the situation here? And the answer comes, and yet he has no choice for these repetitive illusions. So, according to Wordsworth also, as he said that illusions come to his mind and these illusions vanish very soon. Same is the case here with the poet, that these are repetitive illusions which will come into the mind of the poet. These illusions are to be given the shape of the words, as words said, he said in the last lines, are the physical being of flesh and blood, and they will be able to convert those illusions into words. But then it's not that easy. It's not the problem that the poet will be able to solve it so easily. He says that the poet has to do with the same vision, with the same imagination, with the same words, and so that is why he's got no choice at all, and he has to use these two things in order to create poetry. Keep this summer hallways, he lives or dies by them. So it means that words are the very thing. The vision of the poet keeps on living because of that. If it is summer like, I mean, if it is hot, if it is going to be live, it is going to be excited at that time, it is possible for the poet that he may be able to concoct poetry. But then, if it's not possible, then poetry may not be created. So living and dying is metaphorical. That if the poet lives means he will be able to concoct one poem, he will be able to write one poem, and then through his poem he will be alive. On the other hand, if the process fails, if he doesn't act upon the kind of indications which he is receiving, surely his poem will not be composed, and as a result, death of that very poetry will be there. So that is the problem discussed in the second part of the poem, that we come to know about the poetic process, that there are very limitations. The choices are very limited for the poet, that whatever vision he's having, may it be true or not, he has to give the shape to this vision with the same words which are coming to his mind. So words are very important, but equally the vision is also very much important. So let's move on to the next part. It says, when a primitive who grunts and gestures is persuaded to wear clothes to hide his nakedness, he loses identity at once. A caricature who will endure as we conceived him to be. So here the poet is giving us one example of the primitive, naked, savage person who never wore the clothing, and that person is given some kind of force that he is persuaded and convinced that he will be wearing some clothes. And when he is given these clothes, definitely he doesn't want to wear them. And as a result, he grunts and gestures and makes different noises because his nakedness is being hidden. And as a result, he's going to lose his identity, that he was known as a savage, he was known as a primitive, he was known as a naked being. But the clothing which you give to him, they will make not his identity possible. He will be losing his identity. He will become a type of caricature who will endure as we conceived him to be. And we think that what we have done with him, definitely he will be acting upon that. So this part of the poem is equally very much important. Here the poet has given us one symbolical example, that take the example of one naked person, one savage person, one simple primitive man. If you look at him, he's naked, and as a result, his identity, his appearance, his style goes to prove that he is a primitive man. He wants to keep this identity, but then we teach him, we educate him, we change him, and we give him different type of covering. And when we force him to cover himself, he doesn't like this as a result, because he feels that his identity will be lost. But we keep on expecting from him that he will be obeying us, and as a result, he may lose the identity, but our purpose will be served. When we apply this thing with the understanding of creating of the poetry at that time, it's quite clear that creation process is just like the naked savage. And when you give them the words which are forcible words, which are put on those visions and those imaginations, at that time, mostly the real identity of the emotion may be lost. So this is the way to make a very wise choice of the suitable words for suitable imagination or visions. If you don't do so, one of the things would die, or either the vision would die or the language would die. So appropriateness of the language, appropriateness of the vision, both should come at the same table, at the same page. Only then proper poetry can be created. So in that way, the third part of the poem goes to close itself just by adding four more lines by saying, um, as we grow older, the poet says, as we grow older, we try to pair words, not prepare, we try to pair words to the bone. For autumn has struck blindly at the equal leafiness of skull and vision. Again, another image is there of the skull and the vision, of the death and of the life, of the emotions and the absence of emotion. He says that when we grow older, when we grow mature at that time, our qualities, our capacities, our capabilities are sharpened, are paired, are trimmed in such a way that they are close to the bones. I mean, if it's a body and it's trimmed, then the flesh of the body would be trimmed, only bone would be quite visible. For autumn has struck blindly at, it means that the spring, which is the symbolical interpretation of the rise and the growth and the beauty that has turned into autumn. That's the symbol of the fall, of the things which become dry, of the losing of beauty, of the losing of songs, of the losing of smells. And though Keats says that in autumn there are such things present, but still it's not the case like that. So therefore, the things can happen like that when we are older at that time. What is the result of that? The equal leafiness of skull and vision. Skull and vision, again, mind and the heart, again, imagination and the words, which are having leafiness in them. I mean, they are able to connect themselves, but when we grow older at that time, this connection becomes impossible because we are trimmed of the qualities and the things like that. So the poet is indicating that possibility is that as the old age descends, the writing and creating of the poetry may be a trouble for him. So that is why poetic process is going to be very difficult. So in this way, the whole poem, this part of the poem, not the whole poem, this part of the poem is about the interplay of the vision, of the imagination with the words. So if the proper choices are made, if the full capabilities of the poet are there, if his imagination is working, if his mind is working, if his language is working, he may be able to create something and he may live through that. But if it is not, definitely there are so many other difficulties as well. So with these words, the part 3 ends here. Hopefully to see you in part 4. Till that time, keep happy, keep enjoying. And if you like this video, do not fail to hit the subscribe button as well as the like button. Sometime I do restore to the comment section as well. So thank you for watching all that. See you next.